Hello YouTube! This is another video redo in high definition, and also because a lot of people didn't like the freaky computer voice I used in the first one. The medication I was on at the time made it painful to speak, but since that's not an issue anymore, as long as I'm redoing it, I'm recording the voice as well. The computer voice will still be there to read the quotes from Kent Hovind. This all started when Killer92 wanted 25 examples of Kent Hovind telling deliberate lies. Why 25 I don't know, but a cursory review of Hovind's lectures revealed quite a lot of them. I stopped at 40. Shortly after I posted this, Killer92 closed his account. But here, preserved in case of future challenges, are the 40 lies I found. I won't even get into his fake doctorate, or his lie about teaching high school science for 15 years when he really just homeschooled his kids. These will all be about his scientific claims. And these won't be cases where he's simply wrong. They're all either cases where he knows he's wrong because of his original source, or because he's been corrected and continued stating the false information anyway.
Line number 1, the first law of thermodynamics tells us that matter cannot be created or destroyed.
No, the first law states that the total energy of a closed system is constant. Matter and energy can change their form all they want, and even be created and destroyed as in the Casimir effect, as long as the total amount of matter and energy in the universe does not change.
Line number 2, the second law of thermodynamics says everything tends toward disorder.
No, it says that the net entropy of the universe must increase. That's a very different thing, which I have already explained in my video, Creationism and the Second Law.
Line number 3, the Big Bang Theory says that about 20 billion years ago all the dust in space started drawing together into this little bitty dot, and it was spinning real fast. Finally, it exploded out into space.
Wrong. Forgiving the fact that it's really 13.7 billion years ago, nothing drew in because matter, space, and time were all created in the Big Bang. So there was no dust, no space for it to be in, and no way for it to draw together. It didn't explode out into space, it was an explosion of space itself. And there is no sense in which it could be said to be spinning, because there is nothing else that it could be spinning in relation to.
Line number 4, this is called the conservation of angular momentum. One of the laws says in a frictionless environment, if pieces fly off a spinning object they tend to spin the same direction, because the outer part is already spinning faster than the inner part.
The law of conservation of angular momentum merely states that in a closed system, the sum of the momentum is constant. Objects can end up spinning in different directions as long as the rate of spin makes the total angular momentum of the system match what it was originally. Oh, and the outer part does not spin faster than the inner part. That's just silly. All of these so far are basic scientific principles that he would have seen if he had even bothered to look them up. So either he's deliberately lying about what they say, or he's lying about being informed about them. And he has been corrected by many others, so they can only be deliberate distortions.
Line number 5. All of the ancient astronomers said that Sirius was a red star. Today it is a white dwarf.
Hovind knows perfectly well that Sirius is a binary, since he put this fact in his own slide, as I showed in my video, Kent Hovind's Age of the Earth Rebutted. Sirius B is the white dwarf. Sirius A is the brightest star in the night sky, whereas white dwarfs aren't even visible without a telescope.
Line number 6. In 1954, Isaac Asimov calculated that there would be at least 54 feet of dust on the moon, because the moon is billions of years old. They calculated the accumulation rate to be 1 inch of dust every 10,000 years.
Asimov's calculation was a maximum value, but Hovind pretends that it was a required value. He also ignores the other studies which correctly predicted the amount of dust on the moon.
Line number 7. Evolution is a religion, nothing more, nothing less. Evolution is just something people prefer to believe because of their lifestyle.
Hovind knows better. There are many devout Bible-believing Christians who accept evolution, including Dr. Kenneth Miller, author of the foremost textbook on the subject.
Line number 8. One part of a mammoth was carbon dated at 29,000 years old. Another part is 44,000 years old. Here's 2 parts of the same animal. That's from USGS Professional Paper number 862.
Hovind makes a big mistake here. He cites his source. Creationists are too stupid and too easily duped to check sources, so he's gotten away with it. But if you actually look at the source, you'll see that these measurements are from two different mammoths. The source makes it clear. There is no way Hovind did not know that.
Line number 9. Animals with similar density are varied together. Birds are frequently found on top not because birds evolved last, but because birds were the last ones to drown in the flood.
If this were the case, then you'd see pterosaurs with ostriches, mammoths with elephants, and similar-sized lizards with amphibians. You don't.
Line number 10. There are several swamps in Africa that are still reporting creatures like pterodactyls. They are not as big as they used to be. The 50-footers couldn't fly in today's atmosphere. The air is too thin.
This is complete fantasy. No one has ever been able to get a source from Hovind on this, so apparently he just made it up. Plus, the atmosphere has been the same pressure for at least the last 200 million years.
Line number 11. I believe in fire-breathing dragons. It is possible to blow fire. You say, what? Yep, it's possible. There is an insect that lives in South Florida and in Central America that is called the bombardier beetle.
There is no animal that can blow fire. The bombardier beetle spouts hot chemicals under pressure. This is not fire by any stretch of the most deluded imagination.
Line number 12. The bombardier beetle has two chemicals in storage compartments in his rear end. The chemicals are hydrogen peroxide and hydroquinone. When these two chemicals are mixed together, they explode. Boom.
No, they don't. Mix these two chemicals together and nothing happens. Kent has been shown this demonstration by scientists before, and he continued to repeat the lie.
Line number 13. He has a third chemical that is mixed in there with him. The third chemical is called the inhibitor. He has a fourth chemical. The fourth chemical is in the outer chamber. He squirts it in at the very last possible second. The fourth chemical is the neutralizer. The neutralizer eliminates the inhibitor so the first two chemicals can explode. Is this too complicated?
There are no such chemicals in the bombardier beetle.
Line number 14. Before the 1800s, almost everybody believed that the world was only 6,000 or 7,000 years old. They held to the Creationist or the Christian worldview of history.
The Earth being millions of years old predates Darwin by at least a century.
Line number 15. One of the first scoffers in the past couple of hundred years was a guy named James Hutton. James Hutton was one of the first men to really propose that the Earth was more than 6,000 or 7,000 years old.
Not so. In 1779, the Comte de Buffon estimated a minimum age for the Earth at 75,000 years. Of course, the ancient Greeks, Hindus, and others all had beliefs of the Earth being much older as well. Isaac Newton believed that the Earth and the universe were infinitely old.
Line number 16. Everything must be interpreted in light of the geologic column. For example, the Jurassic layer contains dinosaur bones. Therefore, if you find a dinosaur bone, it's automatically classified as a Jurassic layer.
If this were true, they wouldn't have known ahead of time where to dig to find Tiktaalik.
Line number 17. As Darwin read the book about the principles of geology, his faith in Scripture was destroyed. Darwin came back a doubter, a skeptic, a scoffer.
From Origin of Species. He who believes that each species was independently created, to admit this view is, as it seems to me, to reject a real for an unreal, or at least for an unknown, cause. It makes the works of God a mere mockery and deception.
Line number 18. No, man never had a tail.
We have a tailbone, a coccyx, and in the womb, a tail begins to grow and is reabsorbed. Sometimes a human will be born with a full tail, which is generally removed surgically. This is known as an atavism.
Line number 19. Because they cannot find a missing link, many evolutionists have gone to a new theory. The new theory is called punctuated equilibrium. The evolutionists are saying maybe a reptile laid an egg and a bird hatched out, and that is why we cannot find any transitional fossils. Evolution happened in jumps.
Punkgeek says nothing of the kind. The jumps still take millions of years. Punkgeek just says that evolution happens more quickly in small isolated populations and much more slowly in large populations. This is perfectly in line with Darwin's theory. Stephen Jay Gould himself corrected Hovind on this.
Line number 20. Favorite races. Ugh, oh. Charlie, that's not politically correct. You see, Charles Darwin's book came out in 1859. We still had slavery in this country.
But not in Britain where Darwin lived. Hovind knows that. Darwin was using the word race to mean species, not ethnicity.
Line number 21. Charles Darwin was a racist to the extreme.
From Descent of Man. But the most weighty of all the arguments against treating the races of man as distinct species is that they graduate into each other, independently in many cases, as far as we can judge, of their having intercrossed. This diversity of judgment does not prove that the races ought not to be ranked as species, but it shows that they graduate into each other and that it is hardly possible to discover distinctive characters between them. And from Voyage of the Beagle. On the 19th of August, we finally left the shores of Brazil. I thank God I shall never again visit a slave country. Picture to yourself the chance, ever hanging over you, of your wife and your little children being torn from you and sold like beasts to the first bidder. It makes one's blood boil, yet heart tremble, to think that we Englishmen and our American descendants, with their boastful cry of liberty, have been and are so guilty.
Line number 22. Darwin thought that women were inferior. He said a married man would be a poor slave, worse than a Negro.
Kent, Darwin was married to a very devout Christian woman. Hovind gives as his source the autobiography of Charles Darwin, but searching the Project Gutenberg copy for this text comes up empty. From Descent of Man. With women, marriage at too early an age is highly injurious, for it has been found in France that twice as many wives under 20 die in the year as died out in the same number of the unmarried. The mortality also of husbands under 20 is excessively high, but what the cause of this may be seems doubtful. Lastly, if the men who prudently delay marrying until they can bring up their families in comfort were to select, as they often do, women in the prime of life, the rate of increase in the better class would only be slightly lessened.
Line number 23. Evolution is a philosophy of life that says there is no God. We got here by blind chance.
Wrong on 2 counts. Evolution does not preclude a creator, only certain accounts of how he might have gone about his work. It is also not blind chance, but on the application of physical laws.
Line number 24. The philosophy of evolutionism is what drove Karl Marx. You see, we would not have communism today if it had not been for evolution succeeding in the mid-1800s.
Kent, the Communist Manifesto was published in 1848, 11 years before Darwin published Origin of Species.
Line number 25. You see, evolution teaches that only the strongest survive.
No, it doesn't. In an environment where strength isn't an issue, the strong might very well die out to the faster, or the more nimble, or the smaller. It all depends on the environmental pressures.
Line number 26. Evolution is largely responsible for what happened to the Indians.
The Trail of Tears was in the 1830s, 2 decades before Origin was published.
Line number 27. Hitler wrote the book Mein Kampf. You ought to read Mein Kampf and see how many times Hitler refers to racial crossing, superior races, or higher races. The major theme of the book is Germans are a superior race.
If Kent isn't lying about having read Mein Kampf, then he's lying by omitting the fact that the book makes numerous references to God and how Hitler believed he was doing God's work by eliminating the Jews. Of course, if Hitler had really been a Darwinist, he would have done nothing at all, because he would have believed that natural selection would have taken care of the Jews without him doing a thing.
Line number 28. The Great Pyramid is positioned perfectly north, south, east, and west. We have no idea how they built it. We could not build it today.
The Great Pyramid is off by over 5 degrees. Any cursory study will show how it was built, and yes, we could build it much more efficiently today, although we wouldn't have any purpose at all for doing so.
Line number 29. The Great Pyramid is a neat subject to study. If you go up to the king's chamber, you will notice an empty tomb with a red granite coffin. The coffin has the exact dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant.
Using the most generous length for a cubit, the Ark was at most 53 inches on its longest side. That's less than 4.5 feet. The sarcophagus in question is over 6 feet long.
Line number 30. What about Pangea? Were the continents ever connected? School children are still being taught this theory. The only evidence to support this theory is that Africa and South America look as if they would fit together.
Wrong. We can measure continental drift, see the evidence for thrust faulting in the past, observe the trenches in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and see the correlations in the geography of separate continents that were once together, all of which act to confirm this.
Line number 31. Camels have been found at the North Pole.
How, Kent? There's no land at the North Pole!
Line number 32. Today, the Earth is leaning over about 23½ degrees, which is what causes our seasons. By the way, the seasons as far as spring, winter, and harvest are not mentioned in the Bible until after the flood.
Genesis chapter 1 verse 14. And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years.
Line number 33. The textbooks state that it took billions of years to form the Grand Canyon.
No, Kent, 6 million years.
Line number 34. Carbon dating is based on the assumption that the amount of C14 in the atmosphere has remained constant through all time.
Absolutely false. Science has a number of different techniques for determining the amount of C14 in the atmosphere over the past 45,000 years, the practical limit of carbon dating.
Line number 35. Don't fall for the statement they proved it is so many millions of years old, based on carbon dating.
Yes, don't fall for it, because only creationist liars like Kent Hovind make that statement. As I said, carbon dating only goes back about 45,000 years.
Line number 36. How does one measure the distance to a star? The farthest that we can get away on Earth is 8,000 miles.
Parallax measurements can be taken 6 months apart when Earth is opposite its orbit around the Sun, increasing that distance to 186 million miles.
Line number 37. Even Charles Darwin said in his book right here on page 217, Charlie said, to suppose that the eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd. Charlie very much was confused about the human eyeball, because it is so complex.
Blatant quote mining. Reading the rest of the chapter shows quite clearly that Darwin believed the eye evolved and posited a mechanism for it doing so, which has been shown to be quite accurate by modern findings.
Line number 38. The Japanese trawler Zuyomaru caught a dead plesiosaur near New Zealand in 1977.
Even other creationists acknowledge the finding of every scientist who observed the carcass, all of whom say it's a dead shark.
Line number 39. 1963 is when prayer and Bible reading was taken out of the American school system. 1963 is when violent crimes began to increase. You know, there has been almost a 1,000% increase in violent crimes since '63.
His chart only goes back to 1950 and doesn't show that in the 1930s crime was even larger. He also doesn't include the drop in crime rate starting around 1990.
Line number 40. Look, fellow, if you believe in evolution, you got a much worse problem than I do. You have to get two cells to evolve out of the rocks in the same place of the opposite sex at the same time in history.
Hovind knows perfectly well that cells do not come from rocks, since rocks do not contain organic chemicals. He also knows there was no sex, as bacteria do not reproduce sexually. Sexual reproduction took billions of years to evolve. If this conversation really did take place, as Hovind claims, the scientist would have laughed in his face. How can anyone trust this bozo or say that he is anything but a blatant liar? Shortly after I posted this, Coonkiller92 closed his account. But here, preserved in case of future challenges, are the 40 lies I found. I won't even get into his fake doctorate, or his lie about teaching high school science for 15 years when he really just homeschooled his kids. These will all be about his scientific claims. And these won't be cases where he's simply wrong. They're all either cases where he knows he's wrong because of his original source, or because he's been corrected and continued stating the false information anyway.
Line number 1, the first law of thermodynamics,
in which it could be said to be spinning, because there is nothing else that it could be spinning in relation to.
Line number 4, this is called the conservation of angular momentum. One of the laws says in a frictionless environment, if pieces fly off a spinning object they tend to spin the same direction, because the outer part is already spinning faster than the inner part.
The law of conservation of angular momentum merely states that in a closed system, the sum of the momentum is constant. Objects can end up spinning in different directions as long as the rate of spin makes the total angular momentum of the system match what it was originally.
Line number 3, the Big Bang Theory says that about 20 billion years ago all the dust in space started drawing together into this little bitty dot, and it was spinning real fast. Finally, it exploded out into space.
Wrong. Forgiving the fact that it's really 13.7 billion years ago, nothing drew in because matter, space, and time were all created in the Big Bang. So there was no dust, no space for it to be in, and no way for it to draw together. It didn't explode out into space, it was an explosion of space itself. And there is no sense. Hello YouTube, this is another video redo in high definition, and also because a lot of people didn't like the freaky computer voice I used in the first one. The medication I was on at the time made it painful to speak, but since that's not an issue anymore, as long as I'm redoing it, I'm recording the voice as well. The computer voice will still be there to read the quotes from Kent Hovind. This all started when Koonkiller92 wanted 25 examples of Kent Hovind telling deliberate lies. Why 25 I don't know, but a cursory review of Hovind's lectures revealed quite a lot of them. I stopped at 40.
Tells us that matter cannot be created or destroyed.
No, the first law states that the total energy of a closed system is constant. Matter and energy can change their form all they want, and even be created and destroyed as in the Casimir effect, as long as the total amount of matter and energy in the universe does not change.
Line number 2, the second law of thermodynamics says everything tends toward disorder.
No, it says that the net entropy of the universe must increase. That's a very different thing, which I have already explained in my video, Creationism and the Second Law.